Okay, so I got a new video showing how to update to the 7.11 firmware. My last video fell short, and the reason is because they've implemented a newer and stronger encryption certificate for the firmware. We want to come down to certificate management. Once we click on that, we're going to see our available options for certificates. We're going to browse to firmware certificates, and here we're going to notice GE MDS-FW. Now this would be our SSH1 certificate, and the goal of today is to replace this certificate, which will allow us to update our firmware to the 7.11 version. So to replace the certificate, we're going to simply choose Add. We're going to browse our computer for our new certificate, and this is going to be the SSH256. Once added, we're going to go ahead and type in the same name as our previous certificate. So what we want to do is replace the existing certificate. I don't like to delete it because I use it as a reference, as our new certificate needs to match this name. So once we've matched the previous certificate's name, we're going to go ahead and choose Begin Importing. Once that's completed, we will have replaced the existing certificate with our new SHA256 certificate. Now we can begin updating our firmware. So here's our firmware, and I've already actually updated this radio, but we're going to walk through it again. Yours may not have 7.11 showing, and if you notice, we also show active and inactive. So let's go ahead and click on the Actions menu and browse for our firmware. Okay, so we're at the firmware page, and we're going to go ahead and click on Actions. And from here, we're going to select our firmware file, and then we're going to hit Begin Reprogramming. Our firmware has been reprogrammed. It's now verifying the image, and once completed, we're going to do a power cycle. Our firmware has completed. We now see the new 7.11 version available. It's currently inactive. We're going to go back to Actions, and now we're going to power to our inactive image. See you in a couple minutes. Okay, I've rebooted, and now my 7.11 firmware shows as active. So now I'm going to want to do a copy action. So I've rebooted, and now my 7.11 firmware shows active status. Now we're going to want to go back to Actions, and assuming we weren't doing a test of this firmware and we were committed to fully upgrading both our active and inactive image of the Orbit platform, we would do a copy, and that's going to replace that secondary storage on the Orbit platform, and we're going to be running 7.11 on both firmware sets, active and inactive. And that's it. That's all it takes to update the firmware on a GE MDS Orbit.